allowed us to record that part because we know a lot of people experiencing troubles with the network because of the weather in Israel now, the stormy weather. So I have to admit that when I was with Nir in the Emirates, we had a gallery tour with Shaima, and that's where I fell in love with Shaima, and now I will go to the official part. Shaima will talk with us about activism in the UAE. Shaima Al-Balushi is an academic and consultant with over 4 years of experience working with the Emirates public sector. She is passionate about learning and has completed 3 master's degrees in diplomacy and international relations, civil and international security, and international business and emerging markets. Her area of expertise ranges from gender dynamics and feminism, identity politics, and cultural and social movements in the Gulf. Shaima established Inequality Exposed, an online platform that tackles gender dynamics across the world. When Shaima sent me that resume, I asked her, how old are you? I was thinking you're 27, and she told me, yeah, I'm still 27. So Shaima, it's all yours. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Adi. I was just wondering, can I share my screen here?
1 second, we will take care that you will be able to share that.
Just a second. Now you can share.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the awesome introduction. I also had the pleasure, of getting to know you and Nir when you were here in Dubai. And I want to thank everybody for taking an interest in the UAE. The UAE is quite a young country. We're only 50 years old. We're turning 50 this year. But yet, in such a short time, we've managed to take milestones and become one of the most progressive countries in the region and hopefully the world. So I want to talk about activism in the UAE and what activism looks like in the UAE. But before we start, I know Adi gave a brief presentation about myself. But before we move into activism in the UAE, it's important for me to tell you why Inequality Exposed and who am I as a person. So when somebody asks me, who are you, Shaima, I often start by saying I'm a human. Before I say I'm Emirati, before I say I'm a feminist, before I say anything, I say I'm a human. Because when we're connecting on that, it's easy for us to reserve the stereotypes that will eventually come out once I say I'm an Arab woman, once I say I'm a Muslim Arab woman, because that's when stereotypes start. And what Inequality Exposed does basically is that we look at gender inequality not only in the UAE but across the world, because this is a shared conflict that women have wherever we go. And it's about creating a shared sisterhood with women that are struggling with the same thing that we're struggling with. And this is just briefly who I am and what Inequality Exposed is. Now, being an activist in the UAE, the biggest question I get all the time is, how are you an activist in the UAE? Do you even have freedom of speech? How do you express your opinion? Is this an available discourse? And the answer to that question can be a bit complex, but hopefully by the end of this presentation, everything will be clarified for you. So obviously the way freedom of speech looked like in the UAE changed tremendously from pre-2013 to post-2013. So what freedom of speech looked like in 2013 was interesting because basically we were growing up in an absolute monarchic and a tribal country. The UAE back then was 10 times more conservative than it is today. Yet we still had freedom of speech, but it was a different kind of freedom of speech that you are familiar with. So freedom of speech took place through 3 different platforms. The first one being radio channels. So I remember on my way to school, you'd hear citizens or residents of the UAE go on radio channels and complain about many things such as, electricity bills or labor laws or employment. And they would go on radio and complain and critique and criticize government, policies, people. And sometimes the government would respond through the radio channel, and other times the ruler himself of the emirate would respond. And this is the type of freedom of speech we had. The other type was through going to the Sheikh Majlis. So often an individual would go to the Sheikh Majlis, which was often left open for citizens to walk in and convey their complaints. If not the Sheikh Majlis, you had the head of your tribe's Majlis, where you would go to the head of the tribe and convey your complaints, and then the head of the tribe would then convey these complaints to the ruler once they've met. And this was often referred to as desert democracy. And like I said, back then, the things that we complained about look very different than what we complain about today, or what we're active over today, because the culture significantly changed from being that's mainly religious to something that's more relaxed today. So what happened in 2013 and why this switch? And I'll explain what the nature of this switch is now. So in 2013, this was in the heart of the Arab Spring. You had uprisings across the Middle East. And in the UAE, there was an attempted coup d'etat as well. And there was an attempt to form a military wing for Al-Islah, an extreme religious Islamist group. And then what happened was that for the next years that followed, the UAE led the stage away from traditional Islamism and into stronger capitalism and secularism. One of the things that we've actually done recently is that we decriminalized alcohol and we lifted the ban on cohabitation of unmarried couples, which is something that's unique in the Gulf. And also the other thing that happened was that surveillance and security heightened tremendously. But does that mean we have no freedom of speech? We do. But like I said, our freedom of speech looks slightly different than what you're accustomed to. So this is from our constitution. It says freedom of opinion and expressing it verbally, in writing, or by other means of expression shall be guaranteed within the limits of the law. What are the limitations of the law? No criticism of the royal members of the family. No criticism of religions and race, meaning racism or expressing any form of hatred towards a certain group is also a breach of the law. No call for political opposition, no call for uprising, no inciting for opposing the government and creating distress or unrest in the public space, and no call for jihadism as well. To emphasize what I mean by that is, often we ask, where does freedom of speech stop and where does hate speech start? We had a problem in 2013, and as a reaction, we increased our security. And our reaction is catered towards anything that can cause civil unrest. To exemplify or to expand on that, there's another law that says that freedom of opinion is only a breach of the law when it causes disturbance of public security, panic among people, or is prejudicial to the public interest. Other than that, we have freedom of speech, but it's a different kind of freedom of speech. And this takes us to our topic of what does activism look like now? Now that we know that we do have a form of freedom of speech, how do I, as an activist, express my activism, and where did it all start? Interestingly enough, it all started in Saudi Arabia, and what I refer to as the post-Arab Spring online activism and its beginnings. So in 2011, Saudi feminists, they led this amazing campaign, absolutely beautiful, against the male guardianship laws, which basically stated that women are under a male guardian until they die, basically. And then they also launched the Women to Drive movement. And these two movements were quite successful in achieving their targets eventually. But what they did that was monumental is that they triggered a chain reaction across the Gulf. You started seeing feminists rising in Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, the UAE. And you started hearing this chant of, the voice of a woman is revolutionary. صوت المرأة هو الثورة. And you see this happening in countries that historically have been conservative, where women were taught that you need to be humble and quiet. And now suddenly, through social media and mainly through Twitter, women were yelling, women were demanding equal rights. And it continued and it cascaded further and further until it eventually reached the government. And what happened, notably in the UAE, is that we started to see stateless feminism. And what we mean by stateless feminism is that the government itself was actually empowering women through creating different policies, different organizations, and different policies that were meant to elevate the status of women. For example, they created the UAE Gender Balance Council in 2015. And what this council does is that it revisits gender roles. Like I said, we used to be a very conservative society, which mainly had clear gender roles. Men go to work, women stay at home. But now, since women are also starting to work, we had to revisit gender roles. And as a result of that, they passed a new law last year that basically said that men and women should receive equal pay. And this is now constitutional. What also happened is, as a result of stateless feminism, today we see women making up 30% of the diplomatic corps. I was in the diplomatic corps as well. Women make up 66% of the public sector workforce. 27% of all our ministers are females. And this happened within 50 years from a country that was very conservative to a country now that is continuously encouraging and empowering women. I cannot say that we're in a phase where we're equal to men. We're not there yet. But what's good is that you see a joint collaboration between the public and between the government as well towards empowering women further and further. And now what do civil societies look like in the UAE, or what do NGOs look like in the UAE? I have a lot of NGOs from across the world, and recently Israel as well, who have been trying to collaborate with NGOs in the UAE. And it's important for me to say that technically, we do not have non-governmental organizations in the UAE. We have non-profit organizations that all operate under the umbrella of the Ministry of Community Development or under the local community development authorities. And the reason why this is the case is, once again, for surveillance purposes. It's important for them to monitor where your external funding is coming from, who you're funding, where the money is coming from, where the donations are coming from. And in order for them to do that, it's simply easier for them to do it when you're under the umbrella of the government. Yet, this isn't a problem for us, because despite that we're operating as nonprofit organizations, you have seen nonprofit organizations achieve milestones in the UAE and really progress the society as a whole. A good example is Para. Para is an animal activist organization, and they've been very active in the UAE since, I believe, 2012. And what happened recently as a result of Para and other animal rights organizations was that the UAE passed a law in 2017 that made it unconstitutional for a human being to hurt an animal. A person can receive a fine up to 200,000 dirhams, which is around 195 shekels, I guess, and 1 year prison term as well for simply hurting or abusing an animal. You also have Hope. Hope was a local-based and non-profit organization that now has been adopted by the government as well. They introduced the mental support line. What Hope does was that for the first time ever in the UAE, they started talking about mental health, about suicide, about depression, topics that for the longest time in Arab societies have been perceived as taboo topics. They have been perceived as weak attributes that a person can have. But with Hope now, you saw a massive cultural shift. You see a lot of people going online now, talking about their depression, talking about their issues, talking about, consideration for suicide and whatnot. And the government is on top of trying to tackle that as well. And with COVID-19, the government also provided a helpline. And this all happened because these organizations, because these civil societies started rising and started mentioning topics and highlighting topics that have often or long been neglected. And I know this is a question that I might be getting, which is, how can you collaborate with nonprofit organizations in the UAE, or how can you actually enter the market in the UAE? It's important for me to say that as a foreign NGO, it's going to be hard for you to initiate activities in the UAE if you're not registered in the UAE. A leeway through this, or like a way to overcome this, is through collaborating with a UAE-based entity or a UAE-based nonprofit organization. Because like I said, everything has to be, we have high surveillance. They need to understand where the money is coming from, where the funding is coming from, and all of that. And it's easier for them to monitor that if you're collaborating with a UAE-based organization or if you're based in the UAE. So far, this basically summarizes what I have to say about activism in the UAE. And I want to spend the rest of the time receiving any questions you might have. So please feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you, Shaima. I encourage the participants, in order to make it short, to write their questions. But the first one, since we don't have a written question yet, I want to say one thing about Shaima. When I come to think about it, feel free to write your questions. Shaima introduces herself usually as she's half Emirati and half Syrian. And that's not common in the Emirates. and that's part of the feminist identity of Shaima. Usually she has more time to speak about that, Shaima, and that's give you another understanding of the feminism and about where Shaima is in her story in the Emirates. She's a very unique person. You asked for her email and you already got it. Shaima is fast, as you can see. And if you have questions, that's the time to ask your question. Who want to ask a question? I can ask question, but I want to give the other participants to encourage them to do it. Okay, so we have first question from Yuvav. How can the UAE and Israel encourage other Middle Eastern states to uphold civil rights, freedoms, equality, etc.?
I think what the UAE and Israel can do together, and what I think a lot of Middle Eastern countries have been doing together, is grassroots collaborations. You see this actually happening across the Middle East right now, where communities are working together. They're addressing the same topics, and it's only a matter of time before these topics become monumental for the government, such as feminism. It started in Saudi in 2011, but now all of the Gulf states and all of Middle Eastern states are addressing the issue of sexism that exists in the Arab world, for example. So I believe that, Israel obviously is one of the leading countries in the region when it comes to civil societies and women empowerment. And it's something that we can definitely emulate. I know, for example, that the heretic feminist movement in Israel has been very powerful, has been very fierce. And they're also operating in a very conservative society, something that we can learn from as well. How did they manage to achieve their goals operating within a conservative society? So definitely it can happen through grassroots initiatives.
Thank you. And is there any woman artist in the UAE? And that's a question of Tzipi, which is running the studio of women artists in Israel. But I will add to that another question of Ora. Is there a freedom for women travel worldwide?
Yes. Right now, the only Arab country that restricts women traveling until a certain age is Qatar. So women cannot travel until they're at the age of 25 without a guardian's approval. But everywhere else in the Middle East, the UAE, Saudi, everywhere else, we can just travel worldwide anywhere we want.
And about women artists in the UAE?
I encourage her to email me. I actually have many that I can suggest and send her way. But I will need to look at my database first because I have a huge list of artists. But yeah, please email me. My email is right there and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
Yeah, and Sharon is asking the same questions about organizations working in the field of people with disabilities. If you can put her in touch with that. And Tal from WITSO, which is a Jewish women organization, she's asking, do you have issues with violence against women?
Violence against women is unfortunately a global problem. We do have violence against women, but we also have institutions such as the Dubai Center for Women and Children that exist to protect women in case there is abuse, in case there is any violence against them. We also have a hotline for women who are currently experiencing domestic violence. So these things unfortunately do exist everywhere in the world, but what's important is that we build institutions that protect women and that we create a culture of encouraging women to speak up when they are abused. And yes, we do have that in the UAE.
Thank you, Shaima. Do we have more questions? Because we have 10 more minutes with Shaima. Use it very carefully. It's like gold. Let's see. I sent the email also in the WhatsApp group we opened for that event, so you got the email again. And there is a question of Dr. George Rantisi. Is it possible for you to organize a civil service tour in your country?
I'm not sure I understand what that means. Could you clarify, please?
Okay, I will ask George to clarify that. In the meantime, we have Debbie asking, do you address financial abuse against women in the Emirates?
I have to say, I love your question. Honestly, it's a great question. This is something that I actually work on very actively as part of my feminism. We are trying to address financial abuse, but it's something that we receive a lot of resistance from, because they don't see it as a form of financial abuse. They see it as a form of pampering women. So for example, the fact that in the UAE, men receive land grants, whereas women do not receive land grants. And this is a form of financial discrimination where men receive something and women do not. And when we object to this, the response that we usually get is, yeah, but we're giving men these lands so that they can build it for you to live in. You see what I'm trying to say? So it's kind of hard to create a cultural shift here, because that's the idea. They don't perceive it as abuse. They perceive it as a form of pampering and spoiling women.
Thank you. Eden is asking, is it common or is it part of the education in the UAE to donate to non-profit organizations?
It definitely is. And every time, for example, you make a bank transfer, you get a message where they encourage you to donate money. So donation is a big part of the UAE for many reasons, but mainly because we're a Muslim country, and zakat and tabarru' donation is a big part of our religion. So it's something that it's constantly encouraged everywhere you go, basically.
Thank you. And Aaron Ariel is asking, what is the relation to environmental issues in the UAE, especially oil and climate change?
Love that question as well, because second to feminism, I always say that I'm a hippie, and caring for the environment is something I care about very dearly. So the UAE launched multiple nationwide policies, such as climate change policy for 2050, such as food sustainability for 2050 as well. And the idea is we're trying to create sustainability within the city, through, for example, rooftop farming, through, for example, food sovereignty, encouraging locals to grow their own produce as well. And we're also reducing our dependency on oil. So they've been encouraging the usage of renewable energy. We have Masdar, which is an entire organization, an entire city that's meant to be sustainable with low carbon emissions. We have solar parks, and we're always looking for ways to reduce our dependency on oil. So that's definitely a topic that if you're interested in, the UAE is a great partner to look at. We're very much active there right now.
Okay, we have a speaker named Nir, and he wants to ask a question. And his question is, can you tell us something about your cross-border partnership you were a part of, and also about any work you saw done with Israelis?
So as something I'm doing on the side, I've established an organization called UNAS Cultural Foundation with a regional team mainly based in Israel. And what we do is we're trying to bring artists from across the region, and for the first time Israel as well, into the UAE. And we're trying to create this idea of a one Middle East. So we're not talking about it being an Israeli Emirati initiative. We're not talking about it being a Jewish Arab initiative. We're talking about it being a Middle Eastern initiative, because it's important for us to redefine what Middle Eastern means. And working with my team, for example, has been very eye-opening. I've learned a lot about the Israeli society and how complex it is as well. For the longest time, we didn't know much about Israel. You all just assumed that there was just one definition of an Israeli, just one idea. But then through getting to know them, I understood how complex and diverse it is and how rich it is as well culturally. So it was very, very eye-opening.
Hananel is asking from the Friedberg Institute, does your NGO need to get a special permission from the federal government or the local government for some activities? Can you describe the oversight they have over you?
So yes, of course. Like I said, we don't really have NGOs, we have nonprofits. So every nonprofit in the UAE has to register and operate under the wing of the government, so the Ministry of Community Development. And they do have a lot of oversight. So they look at, for example, where we get funding from. Every year we have to submit, they send an external auditor to look at our books, basically. We have to submit every year the list of our activities, what we plan to do. You never really get rejected, but it's simply for them to keep track of what's happening and to pinpoint if there's something fishy happening for security purposes.
Thank you. Eran is asking, I would like to know more about the culture and the daily life in the UAE. Do you have any recommendations for such websites where I can read about these topics? And I will add, it's not necessary to read. I know it's also videos.
Yeah, that's a very broad question, Eran. I don't think I can answer it in the next 10 hours. Honestly, my answer for you would be to come here. The UAE culture is also very diverse. You have different ethnic groups within the UAE as well. You have different cultures depending from tribe to tribe as well. So there's not one uniform culture. Daily life in Dubai also differs whether you're in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, in the suburbans, in Sharjah, and Hatta. Like, it's a very, very broad culture. But more or less, I would say that what is common in all of us is that we have a culture of acceptance. You know, you do you and I do me, more or less. As long as you don't enforce your ways on me, then we can simply be friends. That's what most Emiratis or most residents share as well. Everybody does their own thing and we're all okay with it. We have over 200 nationalities here in the UAE. I'm not sure how that's possible, but we do have over 200 nationalities here. So we're very quite diverse. We have all religions here. So it's a very unique culture. Once you come here, hopefully you're gonna get to know the culture on your own. I mean, Albie can tell you all about that.
Yeah, I have to admit that Shaima is totally right. I was actually surprised by understanding how inclusive the Emirates are. I was there during the Christmas, and you go everywhere. I went for 2 weeks with my kippah, which usually I do not go outside of Israel, just to check. And I didn't feel a threat. Only I got new connections through my kippah, and you could see Christmas trees all over, and on the other side, you hear the muezzin 3 or 5 times a day, all the time. So it's very inclusive, and that's from my perspective. And I will send later on in the WhatsApp group a recommendation for a history video movies about the Emirates, which are speaking also about the culture. That I highly recommended. I watched them after I get back because I came back more curious about the Emirates than when I went there. And last question we have is: the UAE known for any outstanding achievements in any specific industry or maybe some field of education?
I think in terms of industry, the UAE is actually quite diverse. We have huge investment funds that operate from investing in copper all the way to investing in agriculture as well. You know, it's very diverse. And as for education, I would say that this is the vision of the founding father, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, may he rest in peace. And he truly believed in empowering the country through empowering its citizens through education. For example, I studied abroad for my bachelor's and my master's. The government paid for my tuition and I got a monthly stipend as well. And this is what the country does for a lot of its citizens. If you're hardworking, they will make sure that you get the best quality of education. They're trying to improve the universities in the UAE, but at the meantime, they're not limiting you to universities here. They're telling you, go to Harvard. You can't afford it, we'll pay for you. You want to go to Yale, you want to go to America, you want to go to wherever, get us an admission letter and we'll get you there. We'll fly you there. We'll pay for you to fly there, study there, get a monthly salary. All you have to do is work hard, study hard, and come back and serve this country. So yes, I would say we're really like taking a new turn on education. And as for industries, it's quite diverse.
Thank you, Shaima. You're so amazing. I think people now understand why I fell in love with you. So thank you, Shaima. It's 5:30 in Israel, 7:30 in your time, and that's your time to your next Zoom, as I know, next meeting you have. So thank you, Shaima. We have your email. We send that in our WhatsApp group. So thank you very much. People love you. I know because I got private messages about you. And thank you very much. And we are moving to our third part of the evening. And now we have Eyal and Saud, and I will introduce both of them, which will speak about Israel and the UAE relations. Eyal is the founder and the CEO, Eyal Biram is the founder and the CEO of Israelis since 2017, and the Leaders of Tomorrow initiative. He was listed as one of the Forbes 30 under 30 in Israel in 2019. Eyal leads the largest international affairs non-governmental organizations in Israel for young ambassadors with more than 50,000 alumni in the last 3 years. Mr. Saud Al-Hossani co-founded Emirati after leaving his position as manager of diplomatic affairs in the Ittihad Aviation Group and vice chairman of the Ittihad Youth Council. Saud served as the vice chairman of the UAE National Club in the American University in Dubai, where he graduated from with a bachelor degree in business management. Thank you, Eyal. Thank you, Saud. Before I give you the lead, I will just say one thing about Israelis. Esti, we need to give Eyal authorities to share his screen, please. So in the meanwhile, I will say one thing. Israel is an organization that work with Israelis between 25 to 35. For some of you, it sounds to be not relevant, but it is relevant because if you have other workers, partners, volunteers who are working with you, who are in this age, it's highly recommended to be in touch with Israelis later on, as Eyal will explain. I'm just saying that because I want you to understand what Eyal and Saud can give you during the upcoming 20 minutes. So Eyal, please.
So first of all, good evening. That's a really great pleasure. I'm waiting for Saud that he has some technical problems, but he will join us in the next few seconds. I would be more than happy to start with a short video sharing better what we do, and then we will jump in to speak more deeply on that specific project as a new, I think it's a good example of what could happen between social organizations in Israel, between the public society here and in the UAE and in more places in the Gulf. So please just let me know if there is any problem with my sound, but I think it's gonna work perfect. Just a second. So I'm starting with the video, just let me know if there is any problem.
My name is Saud Al-Hossani. I'm from Assalamu alaikum. My name is Saud Al-Hossani. I'm from Abu Dhabi.
Shalom alaikum. My name is Eden Shobal. Shalom alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Yusuf Muhammad and I'm from the Kingdom of Bahrain.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hi.
Shalom, ahlan.
Marhaba. Shalom.
I take part in the Leaders of Tomorrow program because I love meeting new people from all over the world, connecting with them, and getting to really shape the future of the Middle East together.
I want to spread more peace. I want to make a better change for the world, not just for my country.
I see the future of the relationship between our countries as an opportunity, a real opportunity, to seek growth.
Our countries working together allows more opportunities for both our citizens and government.
And with new perspectives on the table, we find a better understanding for our cultural backgrounds, our differences, and find a common ground.
We are going to collaborate, we are going to achieve great projects, and we are going to be definitely having a relationship that's built on trust.
And there is the most important long-term opportunity, which is to really build this connection, to be able to expand them and strengthen them to create a better Middle East.
What I am personally expecting from these new relations is a new family. I would like to introduce my brothers and sisters from different nations to my future children, saying, hey son, once upon a time, we never knew these people existed, but today, they're our family.
So first of all, I see that Saud just joined us. So thank you very much for joining and finding the solutions for the technical problems. So they had a really kind introduction for you. So I can just say that you were already introduced. So just before we will jump in, speaking more deeply what is the Leaders of Tomorrow project, and as an example for a real collaboration that started in the last 6 months. I think the most interesting one is just to mention that we're having here a very important stage, and I want to thanks for Adhi and for the staff that helped us making it happen. So thank you very much, first of all. And I believe that if our short conversation will make an impact, maybe more people will have an idea as how can they collaborate with more organizations in the UAE, in Bahrain, in Morocco, and hopefully in more places in the region. So first of all, I can mention that the connection here that started from Saud and me and the group of the Leaders of Tomorrow started from curiosity. We were curious to learn what's happening in the other side. I can tell from my personal story, I never had any friends from the UAE, from Bahrain, from Morocco. And in the middle of August, after the first announcement of the Abraham Accords, we started to have our first connection. And this first connection brought us for a better understanding what is the potential here and where can we take our daily conversation. And I think that the most important one is what we can reach together with making collaboration and thinking really out of the box of what we can do together. I would be happy, I will share my screen, and as we will start just by explaining it, I would be happy if Saud, when we will just get for the second slide, if you can explain it in your words, but just for the short brief, this is the screen of our first conversation that we had in the middle of August. And another one came afterwards, and another one came afterwards. And after a few weeks, we had a call between me, Saud, and the leaders between both countries. And together we understand that the EASE model, that Saud will explain about it in a second, is a real opportunity for creating connection between the youth and the countries. And here I'm forwarded to Saud. And Saud, if you can give a better understanding of where do you want to take it as part of the UAE's leader.
Thank you very much, Eyal. First of all, I do regret the inconvenience of the technical difficulties. And assalamu alaikum, shalom, and good evening, all the viewers and all the participants. I do thank you for this opportunity at first, and it does give us great privilege and great pleasure to actually share our vision and what we are ambitious to achieve in the near future. The IS model, if you may allow me to explain, is a model that works on the idea of incepting an idea in the current generation, the ages between 25 and 35, who are the future leaders of one another's countries, the future leaders, maybe influencers as social movers, maybe as professionals. And no matter what sector they serve, or no matter what area they have a great impact on, what we would like to do is have the idea of incepting a peaceful thought in each and one of our brains, an idea that could lead us to a better future. We do believe that the leaders of tomorrow come from that age group, and they will be the fathers and mothers of the next generations. To pass on that free and tacit knowledge is our vision. We would like to actually reach out to as much as we could from the youth community in order for us not only spread the word of peace, love, and harmony, but also spread the idea and the actual fact that we are all human. We are all people. We all come from the same grounds. We all come from different, even if we come from different ideologies and values, yet one connection is there. It's the connection of humanity. And this is what we have started in the UAE, obviously following our sister company in Israel. We did reach out to a large number of youth in the UAE. It was a beautiful exponential growth system that we have been approached by our community. And we do believe that growing with each other, hand in hand with people, just remembering that we're humans, is what we are actually aiming for. We aim to get into Bahrain, Morocco, and hopefully in different regions in the Middle East, reaching out all the way to the West and the USA, South America, where there are huge communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities. But nevertheless, I do ask this question. Did I ever imagine the UAE flag next to the Israeli flag right in front of Burj Khalifa? I never have imagined this. But thanks to our leaders, thanks to our governments, today a dream has become a reality, and our vision could also become a reality in the near future. So thank you very much for actually being here for us to explain the IS model. And I do hope that this is an influence to the next generation, passing it on to the one after, to have a better love, harmony, and a beautiful, peaceful world. Thank you, Iyad.
Thank you very much, Saud. So just explaining more deeply what do we do, I can mention that the model is very simple. We ask ourselves a question: how can we cement the peace? How can we take it from the leaders level to the leaders of tomorrow level? And here our focus is understanding that the differences between the warm and the cold peace will be how much public we have here. If we have an opportunity that Saud can take his phone and by WhatsApp or by different kind of application can have a communication with me or different people in Israel, if that's something that can happen on a viral, that's something that can happen on the big numbers, that will be a change, and that will create a difference for the future. And this is exactly what we are focusing here. And here in the model that we started, we decided to be focused on three main goals: to create the foundation for trust and friendship between both countries by creating more opportunities for conversations, including, for example, hackathon that we will have in a few weeks, forums, delegations, and different kind of activities. And most important thing, thinking out of Israel. We are not just of Israel, we are not just about the UAE. We are thinking about the region, we are thinking about the global. We think that if this model will be succeed, we will be able to see more kinds of sister organizations coming in, hopefully, in the Gulf, in the area of Morocco and more countries around, and hopefully maybe in Switzerland, maybe also in Argentina, when we will see Argentina's model starting. And this is exactly what we are now aiming to do. And we understand that making it happen is a kind of a progress. And when we want to achieve it, we are dividing it for two main phases. The first step is creating the digital connection, understanding that all of the connection here must start from screen to screen. That's easy, that's convenient, and each one of us can do it on a daily basis. And the second step is by taking the leadership on both sides and making them into in-depth program that will give them a better opportunity to learn and to create this connection. And we're asking ourselves a question, what we want to achieve. I can mention that it's very easy to answer it, because in the end of the day, we want to see a model that the execution showed us that we can duplicate it between countries. The impact that we started to see here between Israel and the UAE was shared globally. We can see the effects of it in Arab countries, in Western countries, in Israel. And the participants got an opportunity to meet more, to learn, and to have a meaningful connection. And for the long term, we are just focusing on expanding it through tourism. Hopefully, we want to start very soon when COVID will be less affecting on our life. And hopefully, when we'll see more and more collaboration starting. And our model here is very simple. And means I would say it every day. We don't wait for opportunities. We don't wait for the governments, or we don't wait for different kind of companies and entities to create it happen. We want to create opportunity for our friends, for our families, and especially for more people in the region to be part of it. So this is a very short brief of what we do. And if I may, I think an interesting question that I want to ask Saud, that by hearing the last conversation and the one before with Dr. Nirboms, I think the interesting question here is how do the Arab world was accepting the young people of Israel? Or maybe a better question that I think would be interesting, and I want to hear Saud insights about it, is what is the general opinion for kids in school in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Israel, if there is one, today and let's say 5 years before that?
Well, that's a beautiful question, because I actually went through the experience myself, Iyad. 5 years ago, I should actually start with this. The UAE never had any problem with any community. The UAE always had the concept of tolerance. There was a theme in the UAE that carried all year long to different entities, and it was a mandate by the government, and it was called the Year of Tolerance. The question directed to the children in schools and the people who probably did not watch the news or as mature as understanding what the Abraham Accord is. never had the idea of connecting the region together in such sense. That being said, it was up to the leaders to actually consolidate this whole ideology, the new idea of tolerance, all the way down to the youngest person. And it's just beautiful seeing that 5 years ago, I would actually see a child raising a flag of any country. But today, I actually seen pictures and videos of children raising the Israeli flag with a huge smile on their faces. And it went viral in front of Burj Khalifa, in front of Burj Al Arab, the two greatest spots in Dubai, for example. I myself could answer that question by saying, my niece and nephew, they were really excited. They're children, but to see the excitement and the energy coming out of the children just proves to us that today our leaders have actually implemented love and harmony. We are actually normalized today with the Israeli community. The Jewish community, we've been living with them in the UAE. There's a Jewish community today. There are rabbis living in our country, and anyone is more than welcome. I always state this fact where the Emiratis make 10% of the population. The rest of the 90% are diverse. And it's only common to say that the UAE is a tolerable country, it's an accepting country, whereas, we find neighbors from different parts of the world. We've heard of new religions that we've never heard of. And that gives us the opportunity of education, the education that we could pass on to different generations. And that only aims to have a generation that's more understanding and more tolerable to such ideas. They've stated this in many of the forums that we've conducted, and many of the forums that we took part in. We've tried war, we've tried hate, we've tried many factors that didn't work in the past. However, today we're taking a stepping stone into a beautiful milestone that we could actually make use out of the region, make peace out of the people. And today we could actually connect to people by COVID had the silver lining. The connection to the end of the world is easier today. And that only gave us the opportunity to create an opportunity actually, and not wait for one, to have this beautiful family come together and to see each other. Today we see each other behind screens, but I am certain definitely that I will have an Israeli neighbor in the near future. That just puts a smile on all our faces in the UAE. And the funny part is that this is out of a personal experience, is that when Eyal reached out to us the first time, it was my brother's wedding, and I actually had to step out and just rush in front of a computer just to know Eyal is an Israeli and he's connecting to us. That's the first time for me. And the first times are always the most remembered moments. And all of us had tattooed smiles on our faces, and all of us canceled many booking to different communities and different religions and faiths, and we're all tolerable to that. We all have smiles on our faces. And today this does give me a privilege of speaking in front of all of you, coming from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. And I myself may be a different ethnicity to you, but again, one factor always ties up together, whether we were children, whether we were adults, the factor of humanity. And this is what we're trying to implement over here with Eyal.
Thank you so much. So, I think the most interesting part is what's brought you to stay out from to go out from your brother's wedding and be at that Zoom even before we met for the first time. But it's really outstanding. I can just showcase one opportunity for if one of you want to join and be part of it, or send it for friends, family friends. This is the first UNI hackathon that's going to be in a month and a month approximately, on the 16th of March, when we invite for 3 days the best experts in both countries to ask a very important question. How can we build the relation between both countries once COVID will be less effective on our life, and we will see more people traveling, Israelis to Morocco, Bahrain, and to the UAE and Emiratis coming to Israel. And when people are going to have more connection by tourism, we'll have an opportunity also to make a better education on both sides. It can be virtually, but it could be also an opportunity for a physical connection in the hubs and the center. For example, someone coming to one of the centers in Israel sharing his story, perspective, and what's made him to come here. And for the same thing can happen also in the UAE. And that's an invitation for all of you to invite your members of the organization to join. Of course, that's an open event. And the winners of the hackathon are gonna have a free trip to the UAE and Emiratis free trip to Israel. And I saw one of the questions that was marked in the chat, and the question was if there is any governmental support involved in it, and what is the method of making kind of the same program. And here, I think Saud can share with you his experience as a new entity, hopefully from next week in the UAE. But this is a very interesting question because the relation that's starting here is also showcasing as a new opportunity for collaboration and for civil life that maybe in Israel was a major part of the 40,000 NGOs, but in the UAE, that's in a developing progress that's very supported by the government. And Saud can showcase from his experience about that.
Definitely an experience, a beautiful one, to be honest. It started off, as an idea of how could we get Israelis into our market. We had many entities that supported the idea of youth empowerment in the UAE. We had a ministry, we have a ministry, a minister, the youngest minister that was ever appointed. She was the Minister of Youth. And Eyal and I thought, how could we actually, tip our fingers into such area? Now, that being said, we explored in the UAE on the parts of how could we establish an NGO. NGOs probably in the UAE are not as big as they are in Israel. But, as Eyal presented to us, we don't wait for opportunities, we create them. We've stepped up and we've reached out to many areas in the UAE government and focusing on Dubai, since Dubai is a beautiful gate to many people around the world. Dubai government has backed us up. They loved our idea, and they adopted the whole concept by appointing us as the leaders of tomorrow. And I must say that if we look for government support for such projects, the government is actually looking for projects to support them in a better sense. If I would answer that question, it comes vice versa. The government of the UAE today has normalized its relations with Israel, and it just so means that the government is actually looking into many projects with Israel, whether they were in the military sector, the tech sectors, the educational sectors, and especially in the food and agriculture sector, which was one of the first ones ever. So you'd see a lot of Emiratis that would actually, step up to the government saying, hey, we have such idea, and the government would adopt that idea, support them, empower that idea, and, probably be the focal point between Israel and that idea. And we've seen live examples of such, whereas when we walked in a supermarket one day and we saw Israeli products just presented in front of us, and it was just an idea from one gentleman who owns a fruit and vegetables company, and he had flew in the food goods from Israel, and the government has backed them up. And to see that type of backup, it actually answers the next question. The next question, if I think that what needs to be changed in order for the peace with all our neighbors, the government has set an objective, and that objective will be carried on by the people. Our leaders, if they light up a candle through a dark tunnel, we will follow them through all the way till the end of the tunnel, and that is what has happened. When they actually normalized the situation between us and Israel, we saw a lot of Israelis that wanted to get into the market and vice versa. So the only backup that we had, the major backup that we had, was our governments. And our governments did not even hesitate once to give us that kind of backup. So if I would also answer the next question, it is a fresh piece with the UAE. And there are cold pieces with different countries and probably missing ones. But I do believe it's on the people to accept the idea, to accept that today we are all humans, and it's on the people to lift up that to turn that candle into one of the one beautiful torch where we can see through the darkness. And this is what we need to be changed. We need to have the people's ideologies understand that we all come from one background in the end. We're all, as we say, cousins, and the end between Muslims and Jews. Family is a huge part of both our cultures, And I do believe that, you know, family orientation is what will keep our relation strong. And this is what me and Eyal have, a brotherhood. And this is what we've passed on to our friends and family. We've passed on to many of our members, which we call brothers and sisters. We come from a united country, and as the saying says, united we stand. So if we all unite together and we could actually move forward, nothing could stop in our way. If any obstacle comes through our way, we could work around them. Again, we don't wait for the opportunity to happen. So we take our first stepping stone and we move forward. It's on the people to do so. It's on the population to actually move forward, change the ideology of the past experiences, and actually have a self-experience with the counterpart. You cannot judge a book by its cover. So we did read our books and we love them.
For answering a few questions that have been raised in the chat. So first of all, I sent my email, and please, I would be more than happy, I will send it again right now, to develop each one of the collaboration that can start here from Israel virtually with the UAE and can hopefully grow to be also physically once flights and restrictions are going to be less affecting our life. I can just mention that very soon Saud and the group from the UAE will come to visit Israel, hopefully just after Pesach. And we are just looking forward for more opportunities for collaboration, and we would be more than happy. We did in the last 6 months a bunch of different forums, from innovation forums to culture forums, to business and artist one that shared their perspective on life. And mostly we wanted to create in each one of these forums to take young people, 20 to 35 years old, with different opportunities to build these bridges. That bridges can be in business, that bridges can be in culture, that bridges can also be in friendship by creating this connection. And all of them, we would be more than happy to connect and to start to have a better collaboration with your organizations. And please find it as an open invitation to contact me, and I will also speak about it later with Saud. And I would like again to thank you for the opportunity. If you have any questions, please feel free to I see that there is one in the chat.
I could actually answer one of the questions, Eyal,
yes,
by the participation and cooperation with you. We in Arabs in Israel, the Arabs in Israel want to connect with us and to promote shared economy. What we do over here, Eyal and I, we act as a focal point between the communities. So obviously, the Arab Israel is a huge community, and we are the focal point if you would like to get into our markets, if you would like to get into our sectors. As Eyal said, we carry different forums along the way. And, you know, there are so many forums that were related to people with different backgrounds. For example, for the cultural forum, we did have an Emirati cook, for example, present to us food. But for the business forum, we had different CEOs and people from influential people in the business world that have been connected through the two areas. Actually, not just two. So there was Bahrain and Morocco involved in our forums too. We do give that platform. We do actually aim to give a bigger opportunity of such people-to-people connection, and obviously people that represent different sectors. I do urge you to, you know, follow what we do. I do urge you to follow our platforms in order to get into different markets. We are here today not just to change an ideology or to connect people, you know, point to point. We're also here to enhance the relations and to enhance the sectors. And it's just a great connection that we could learn from each other. I mean, I could learn a lot from the Israeli economy and pass it on to different sectors, or probably invite people in our forums where there could be a human-to-human connection, even though it's behind screens, but it's still a connection.
I would like just to summarize and to thank you for this incredible conversation. Saud, it was a great honor as usual. And please join us. My email is there. I will connect, of course, each one of you if you have any specific questions and any ideas that you want me to share also with Saud. I will make a follow-up afterwards. And thank you so much. That was a really great pleasure. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Adi, we are forwarding it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eyal. Thank you, Saud. It was so impressive. And I encourage and urge every participant to understand how to work with Israelis and with Eyal. This is a great opportunity to build bridge with the Emirates and Saud and his other friends. So thank you very much. You're doing amazing work. And I have to admit to thank Nir, our first speaker, for putting us in touch together.
We also need to thank Nir, our mentor, advisor, member. We can call it in each one of the tickets. Thank you very much, Nir.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. So thank you. Our next speaker is Najat. Hello, Najat. Say hi. You're mute now.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hi.
Najat, I will introduce you, but before I will introduce you in the formal way, I just want to tell you that the first time I met Najat, we didn't have a lot of chance to speak, but we didn't need to. You just need to understand the situation. It was in Chabad House in Dubai, where I'm meeting a Saudian lady who is sitting in front of me in Shabbat's table, and just 10 meters away from us, we have the chief rabbi of Israel coming to bless us for Shabbat Shalom, and that's amazing situation that's happened exactly 2 months ago, and it's something we couldn't imagine just so long ago. But now I want to introduce you to Najat. Najat will speak with us about media and entrepreneurship in the Emirates. And Dr. Najat El-Said is an independent researcher in political communication and development. Dr. El-Said is a former researcher at Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research in Abu Dhabi. Najat earned a PhD in media studies at the University of Westminster in London, UK. She holds 2 master's degrees in health, promotion, disease prevention, and computer information system from American University in Washington, D.C. Najat is a columnist in Al-Ittihad, an Arabic language newspaper published daily in the UAE, and also columnist in Al-Hura, an American satellite television news channel in Arabic. And starting from January 2021, she's joined Israel Hayom as a contributor and a columnist to the newspaper. Dr. El-Sayed worked at Zayed University in Dubai, UAE from 2014 to 2018 as an assistant professor in the College of Communications and Media Sciences, and all her experience throughout the past 20 years was in the Media Institute's development organization and diplomatic sectors. She's author of Screens of Influence, Arab Satellite Television and Social Development, Case Studies in Poverty, Literacy and Violence in Underprivileged Saudi Women. Her book, Gulf Tweets, Twitter Diplomacy and Media Polarization, will be published soon. We are looking forward to that. Dr. Najat, where are you?
I'm here.
Yeah, the platform is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for this introduction, Adi. And I will try to wrap it up since this is the last lecture. And today, as Adi mentioned, I'm going to be talking about media in the UAE and entrepreneurship. So basically, in order to know how to integrate your business in the media, I have to give an overview of the media in the UAE. And from there, you can understand how you can promote your business in the media. First of all, I'm going to be talking about the historical establishment of the media in the UAE. The UAE was officially formed on December 2nd in 1971. And for a new union, the main function of media in general and broadcasting in particular was to act as catalyst for sustaining 2 things: national identity and economic development. The UAE's population stands at 9.4 million, between 10% and 15% of which are UAE nationals, while the remainder is made up of expats. Based on these numbers, the power of media in the UAE is perceived to have risen not only from its role in promoting national identity and fostering economic progress, but also from its role in building bridges with international audiences. The unique federal nature of the UAE has produced several distinct systems within radio and television broadcasting. The programming philosophy of both media is oriented towards the tastes and interests of the population of all 7 Emirates. For example, Abu Dhabi media are more focused on matters of political and national security, while Dubai media is run as business. Since the highest percentage of expats is located in Dubai, its radio and television services rely mostly on expats. On the other hand, Ajman and Sharjah television channels focus more on locals. Regarding the press in UAE, the first printing facility was set up in Dubai in 1958, and it was used to print official bulletins and individual publications. The printing industry in UAE was booming by the early 1990s, partially because of the increasing demand from neighboring Kuwait, whose printing facilities were suspended during the Iraqi invasion in the first half of the 1990s. So accordingly, there was more pressure on the Emirati press due to what happened in Kuwait. The printing industry witnessed a boom with the number of publications reaching 1 and 5 by 1996, ranging from Arabic language and English publications, including Khalij Times, Gulf News, Gulf Today, Emirates News. The English language press was directed to the large expat communities, which form around 80% of all residents in the UAE. Newspapers are now arguably the dominant platform, holding about 40% of the advertising spend. Regarding Emirati broadcasting, the real start of broadcasting in the UAE dates back to the establishment of the 7 Emirates Federation on December 2nd, 1971. So it's a very young country. All radio channels in the UAE have live broadcast program. The federal governments wanted to understand the needs and complaints of their citizens. For example, the radio channel from Abu Dhabi focuses in the morning on citizens services issues, and in the evening on cultural and social issues. Also, the same thing in Dubai, but with more focus on entertainment as music. In Sharjah, the focus is more on Islamic, cultural, and educational programs. So each Emirates had its own identity and the differences, and accordingly, the media will follow these kinds of differences. The UAE was just like other Arab countries keen to establish successful television channels. Abu Dhabi TV was first shown in August 1969, followed by Kuwait TV from Dubai in September 1969. Then it was renamed Dubai TV, and then the Sharjah TV, Ajman TV, and Fujairah TV were launched. The early 1990s was the development of phase for broadcasting in the UAE, which then became international thanks to its satellite services. Actually, this happened not only in the UAE, but in most of the Arab world. The booming of the satellite television was in the 1990s. When the Ministry of Information and Culture was abolished in 2006 and succeeded by the current National Media Council, the localization of broadcast operation was already complete, leaving the National Media Council with only regulatory functions with media. By the end of 2010, all broadcasting services in the UAE were operating as part of local government structure. At the beginning of the millennium, the UAE established free media zone. As maybe most of you know now, there are a lot of media zones in UAE. Dubai Media City, Free Zone of Technology, Dubai Production City, Dubai Outsource City, Dubai Internet City, Dubai Studio City, Abu Dhabi Media Free Zone, 2454, Ras Al Khaimah, and Ras Al Khaimah Media City, and also Creative City, Fujairah. So you can see the many media zones in the UAE. So media institutions and companies located in the free zones function according to the laws and regulation of these free zones, which are consistent with the state laws. One of the most important characteristics of these free media zone is that they are exempt from paying tax, while necessary services are still provided. This is something important that you should know. It's tax exempted. As there are numerous media offices and companies, There are also many media events, and this is very important when you try to promote your business. For example, the Arab Media Forum, the Dubai Film Festival, the Abu Dhabi Media Summit, Abu Dhabi Film Festival, the International Government Communication Forum, and the Media and National Identity Forum. All these events aim to open dialogue, deepen debate, and exchange ideas on media issues related to the region and the world. The media regulations, which is also important for you to know, all media institutions in the UAE, including Free Zone, must comply with the standards set out in federal law and the UAE's national standards. So the role of national media in reinforcing national identity and economic growth. The findings of the Arab Media Outlook from 2016 until 2018 show that UAE satellite television channels are not widely watched among Emiratis, especially the youth, compared to other satellite television channels. Mass media came third in place in terms of successful catalysts in the formation of cultural identity after family and internet. However, studies show that the UAE public preferred Abu Dhabi 1 and Sama Dubai channels because of their local news coverage and the social and religious programs that attract Emirati viewers in particular. Examples of these programs are Ulum al-Dar, which means news of the house. Basically, this program is news bulletins of the main local news in the UAE. And the religious program, Rahiq al-Iman, Faith Nectar, that is on Abu Dhabi 1 channel. On the other hand, in Dubai, the most popular channel among Emiratis, Sama Dubai. The most watched programs are Akhbar al-Imarat, which means Emirati news, and Ma'an Nastati', which means Together We Can, and Shabab al-Yawm, which means today's youth. All other studies show that radio stations are more popular among the youth adults because of the range of programs on offer, such as Radio Sharjah, Nur Dubai, and Al-Rabi'a FM from Ajman. So basically, the youth are more, which is something that you don't see in other Arab Gulf countries, that they are more reliant on radio more than the satellite television, because first, they can see the programs they want is more available on radio. Secondly, most of the Emirati youth spend their time in the cars. So that's why they are more tend to listen to radio shows more than television. Broadcasting and economic development, all broadcasters carry financial and business news in their daily national broadcasts, dealing with stock markets, real estate, the construction sector, trade and energy. All of that, you will see it in most of the channels. On the business-oriented shows like Economy on Abu Dhabi television and Money Map, and economic trading on Dubai channel, audiences are introduced to new developments in the market. In addition to these programs, business ventures and projects are regularly featured in news broadcasts. So mainly, the business news, you can see it on Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and on Dubai television, it's even more. The transition of broadcast organizations towards market-oriented business practices has had important implications for the volume of advertising spending. So advertising spending is so important in the UAE media. Since the late 1990s, the UAE is the second largest economy in the Arab world, has been positioned one of the highest in terms of advertising spending levels. According to the 2014 advertising monitoring reports in the Pan-Arab Research Center, one of the top spenders is Dubai Shop Festival at $14.923 million. According to the same media split analysis, television spending on advertising is the highest at $11.930 million. Given this emphasis on profit and revenue and trend towards ever greater globalization, the media's objective to build a national identity hasn't been that successful. Because most programs focus on commercial entertainment. For example, the free media zone in Dubai has become the focus of a profit-driven investment. So this is only a general overview of the UAE media that can give you an idea for the best ways for advertisement of your business and how you can target your audience. This is just an overview. Thank you for listening. And if you have any question, please go ahead.
Thank you, Najat. I encourage the participants to write questions in the chat. And I will start in the meanwhile, and I would like to ask you a more personal question. What made you want to write a column for Israel Hayom, which is Israeli newspaper?
Well, let me tell you. First of all, this whole peace treaty wasn't something that came over a sudden for me. I was hoping for that long time ago. And but unfortunately, because the whole environment wasn't giving me the chance, I was kind of subtle in my writing. You know, so for example, let me tell you how I did it subtly before. I did it subtly before, like for example, in Gaystone Institute. When I start to write in the Gaystone Institute, which is quite conservative media, because I know very well that my articles will never be published in the mainstream media, like for example, the Washington Post or the New York Times. So that's why I targeted the conservative media in the US. So I tried to show through my writings the hypocrisy of those who are anti-Semitism and anti-peace. Through my writing. I couldn't write for peace directly, but I could go through it in the indirect way. And if you go and read my articles in the Gaystone Institute, you can tell that. Also, I did it on Al-Hurra channel because it's an American channel, but in English. I did it, for example, also in an indirect way. For example, I wrote about the anti-Semitism in the Egyptian movie. And I said like how this is spreading anti-Semitism and how we can, and this is not good in order if we are encouraging for anti-Semitism in the region, that through movies, which is highly watched, especially among the youth, that means what we are going to be suffering from extremism in the whole region, because you are feeding this ideology. When the peace treaty came, I said, oh my God, now I can breathe. Now I can open up and speak up. So I started to write, you know, my thoughts more explicitly in articles in Arabic through Al-Ittihad newspaper. And also I said, why I don't go direct to the Israeli community? Why I go through the Americans? So I met the editor-in-chief of Israel Hayom in one of the webinars. And when he talked, I said, everything he said clicked in my mind. I said, what amazing thing. We are talking the same language. What he's saying is the same thing that I'm saying. So accordingly, afterwards, I met him in another webinar, and then I contacted him directly. I said, look, I want to write in the Israeli Hayom because I want my point of views to be shown to the Israeli public, and I want them to see another view other than the extremist view that they are like used to. And I want specifically the conservative society of Israel, not the leftists. This is my target audience, because honestly, I'm against Western apologists to extremists. And I see the conservative, whether Americans or Europeans or Israelis, are more aligned with my thoughts rather than the leftists, because the leftists are like really helping the enemies, our enemies, who are the extremists. The conservative might be, you know, portrayed in the liberal media as racist or like Islamophobic, but honestly, if you think deeply, they are more. They can help us to fight those extremists in order to promote peace and tolerance in the region and coexistence. So that's basically why I wrote in the Israel Hayom. These are the reasons.
Thank you. If there is someone else who wants to ask questions, feel free, because I have many other questions. Najat, I will ask one more personal question. Mm-hmm. You live in the Emirates, but you are mm-hmm. not Emirati. You are from Saudi.
Yes.
What's your perspective of working with Israelis as a Saudi in the Emirates, or as a foreigner in the Emirates?
Well, I don't see myself really a foreigner here because I'm from the Gulf, and the Saudis are quite close to the Emiratis. And also we have blood, with personally, my sister is married to an Emirati. So my nieces and nephews are Emiratis. So I don't see myself in a strange country. We are so close culturally, and everything. And beside that, honestly, and I even said that yesterday on a TV show, through my writings and through my analysis, I had, before even coming to the UAE, I had an imaginative city, country in my mind, in terms of development, in terms of initiatives, in terms of many things, culture, in terms of taking this region from extremism to development and prosperity. And I see all of that in the UAE. That's why when I finished my studies in the States, I encouraged my family. I told them, look, go, and I even asked my dad, please just go and visit UAE and see how that, because I visited UAE before my family. Go and visit this country and see. He likes it. And then he came, and the whole family came, moved from the States in 2003 and to here. We moved then afterwards to other countries, but our main establishment here. So I don't see myself honestly as a foreigner at all. And basically what encouraged me to write for the peace treaty, after the peace treaty happened in UAE, between UAE and Israel, and then after it happened between Bahrain and Israel, I said, you know what? That means that the Saudis, are accepting that. So that's what encouraged me to open up about the idea. As I told you, the idea of peace and diplomatic relations was my dream long time ago. It's not something that came over sudden, but opening up about it in that way is recent. That's the only difference in my situation.
Najat, you have a lot of experience with entrepreneurs and also social entrepreneurs. And I would like to hear from your experience if you have best practices for our crowd here about what to do or not to do when you want to create a cooperation between Israeli entrepreneurs and Emirati entrepreneurs.
Well, regarding entrepreneurs, as you see it, it already have happened, and there are many businesses now that are happening. Is basically how to promote the business through what I'm saying, how to promote your business through the media. So as I mentioned, the focus of the Abu Dhabi media is more on politics and national security. So if your business is more geared into that sector, it's basically to go and target Abu Dhabi. But if your business you are more into small business or more and different kind of business other than governmental or private or national security, you go to Dubai and target their own media. Regarding, and also you have to have a target audience for your business. Are they the youth? Are they the adult? Are they the younger? So as you see, the younger generation are not watching satellite television that much. So it's not really wise to go and advertise your business through using the satellite TV. So it's better to go through the internet, but through using the social media and through using also the radio, other than the satellite TV. Also, as you see, we are running shortage in general, not only in the UAE, in general of content. So I believe there's a big room of investment if the Israeli can propose a good content TV show, because the fact that's what I said in a lot of my writings and my contributions. The fact that the younger generations and the people in general are running out of the traditional media is not because they are tech savvy and they're more into the social media and more into technology, because they are missing good content in the traditional media. So if you have for example, can think of, because the investment and business can be also in the media. You can invest in the media. We are running really shortage of, so for example, in the TV show that I talked about in Dubai TV, Shabab Today, it's a Today Shabab, or Youth Today. We can you can, for example, invest like in what the previous speakers were talking about, in a collaborated show, TV show, talk show among Israeli youth and the Emirati youth, that will be something new that hasn't been done, and it could it could attract a lot of viewers, and accordingly you will the business of TV, the higher viewers means higher spending of advertisement. Okay, so something like this hasn't been done, and then you promote it in the social media, like really like interesting topic for the youth of both countries. That's something that we are really missing in the media, something attractive that attracts the younger generation. At the same time, you can change the mindset without like dictating it, and create this collaboration in a friendly way, and also promoting a business. So you're doing three things in one. So this is my advice, like know exactly what is your business, see the differences between the different Emiratis, the different Emirats, and what each Emirat, and each aging group has a target. You can target each age group with a different kind of media platform. So that's my advice for entrepreneurs.
Sharon is asking, where will social issues interest more in the UAE, Dubai or Abu Dhabi? I want to put the emphasis in Israel. When you say social issues, it can be climate issues, feminist issues, peace issues, conservative ideas that you want to promote, art issues.
Issues in what term? Issues you mean complications or what?
It's mean if you want to promote social change or social impact on art, sports, ecological issues, and not like if you're non-profit, not if you're a business necessarily.
Mm-hmm. You mean social marketing? In terms of social marketing business, not entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
okay.
Not for profit. Yeah.
Not for profit.
Yeah.
Okay, the social. Okay. If as I mentioned, the highest expat population is in Dubai. There are fewer locals in Dubai compared to Abu Dhabi. Most of the locals are in Abu Dhabi, and you will see them in the other Emirates, like for example Sharjah and the Fujairah and Ras Al Khaimah. And on Abu Dhabi, the main target of the Emirates in general is on politics and national security, while the others are, like for example Sharjah is more on religious moves and religious interests and cultural interests and education. For example, if you want to promote certain kind of educational sector or something about the education, it's really important to promote that on the Sharjah TV, because Sharjah's focus on education is really tremendous. If you're, for example, if you are more into, like for example, into like sport, women's fashion and sports, for example, I advise you to go for the Dubai, because Dubai has more open environment compared to the other Emirates. The other Emirates are more conservative. Like Abu Dhabi is more conservative than Dubai. It's normal because there are more locals, and locals definitely are more conservative than expats. So if you want to promote your business and fashion, which is a little bit revealing, I encourage that to go to the Dubai media. And if it is more like for example the issue of climate change and that stuff, it's like more in Dubai, for example. If you want to go to hard power, like for example you go to weapons, that kind of business, okay, the hard power business, definitely you will promote that in Abu Dhabi, because it is quite diverse, by the way. And I noticed that from living in Dubai and living in Abu Dhabi, I can tell the difference between the population. I will never, reach the population of the Abu Dhabi people, the same as the Dubai people. And definitely Sharjah will be totally different. So you have to study the environment, and based on that, you promote your business, whatever, whether it is non-profit, profit, social, marketing, you have to study the environment and to study your target audience. if you want your business to be successful and the target media to be successful.
Thank you, Najat. Actually, it's now 6:30 in Israel, 8:30 at your place. So officially, we are done, and I want to let people feel free to thank you and to say goodbye. But if you wish, we have more questions here. If you wish to stay and ask, but officially, I want to end it up, to wrap up.
Everybody's tired. If they have any questions, they can email me. You can send them my email or even my phone number.
I will. Thank you very much, Najat. I wish that the next time I will be able to invite you to have an event, it will be for the peace with Saudi. And I wish that you will be
that's my dream.
Our keynote speaker then. And I also hope to see you hopefully soon in Israel. I know you have plans to come to Israel soon.
Yeah.
So I hope it will happen too. And let me know as soon as it will happen. Maybe if the COVID issue will be solved by then and you will be able to come, I will be more than happy to connect you and put you in touch with our community and the people here. So I want to wish everyone a good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Najat, for amazing talk. It was very interesting and deep, and people are thanking you. So thank you very much. See you next time in our event.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye.